Great, and welcome to a discussion that we're about to have about how the gaming industry can make a difference on the environment and make a difference on climate change. I think many of us have experienced a fairly tough lockdown over these past few weeks, with games being something that many of us have enjoyed as a way of passing the time and distracting us from the life that we live in right now. But this is a conversation about, can games really make a difference when it comes to themes such as climate change and the environment? And what is the industry doing on this agenda? And what are the ideas that are starting to come through? And I'm really delighted to be here with three really top-end practitioners on this agenda. And I'd like them to introduce themselves so we can begin this discussion. So Alan, if I could go to you first.
Sure, I'm Alan Gershenfeld. I'm the co-founder and president of Uline Media.
Super, thanks Alan, welcome. Mathias?
Mathias Norvig. I'm the CEO of Sybo Games, the developer and publisher of Subway Surfers.
Cool, welcome Mathias. And Pietari?
Hey, my name is Pietari Päivänen. I'm a lead of special projects at Supercell.
Great, thanks Pietari. And my name's Sam Barratt. I work for the UN at the UN Environment. I have the privilege of working with these three gentlemen on the Playing for the Planet initiative, which is what we've set up to try and really help the industry think about how it can have games that can talk about messages around climate change and the environment, and also start to decarbonize their platforms as well. So it's great to have you three with us on this discussion. I think we've got a really, hopefully interesting set of questions that we want to run through. And Alan, I'll come to you first. And I think we've seen how different entertainment genres have taken on these themes, such as whether it's films, whether it's books, you name it. But where is the gaming industry on this? Is it thinking about it but hasn't done anything about it? Or is it starting to move on this agenda?
Well, I actually think the Playing for the Planet Alliance is a great start to get the industry aware and thinking about the environment and climate change. But it's interesting you mention different media formats. When you look back in time at different media that has really moved the needle in terms of the environmental movement, I think it's worth calling a few things out, like the book Silent Spring by Rachel Carson in 1962 in some ways started the environmental movement, and you could draw a direct line to the creation of the EPA in America. I think when you look at even photographs like the Earthrise photograph, William Anders' photograph from space on Apollo 8, kind of raised awareness about a singular planet, an interconnected planet, possibly the most powerful environmental artifact. Then you get to film documentaries like Inconvenient Truth, or more recently, Blue Planet 2 from the BBC, which you can draw a direct line to single-use plastics legislation. So media has played a role for a long time in terms of moving the needle in behavior change and climate. With games, it's interesting. I go back to 1992 in the game industry, and in 91, Civ 1 and Sim Earth actually had climate as core themes. And games are unique. I mean, games are lean forward, not lean back. They're interactive. You get feedback. You have agency. You can explore complex systems. You can do it socially. But there hasn't been a ton. And interestingly, if you take Civilization as an amazing franchise, Civ 6 actually brought it back almost decades later. It was very prescient in Civ 1. You get a lot of post-apocalyptic games that may touch on why we're in a post-apocalyptic, but I wouldn't say the game industry has gone deep from a content level, and I think that's something worth exploring.
Okay, and just building on that, Mathias, Alan was talking about the Civilization franchise of games. What are you seeing that's coming through on this? Are there things that you're impressed with that's catching your attention?
Yeah, I mean, Civ 6 is a great example because actually adding pollution as a factor means that all the choices are affected by your choices in the game. I think the games industry has a huge potential and a huge reach in that we can drive a narrative in different ways. I think actually Alan's company has done some games that are very story driven around these messages. I think it's important in the Playing for the Planet Alliance that every company should do what they can or where they are. We have some game makers that are very keen on doing fun and engaging stories, but then actually adding elements, whether it's a kind message in a story-driven game, whether it's a whole narrative, whether it's gameplay choice, whether it's hidden visuals in the background, or whether it's actually a whole game. I see a lot of good things coming. Also, I mean, both on social, but also on green, we saw Pixelberry doing anti-bullying in one of their storylines. And I think you can drive a lot of messages through games like this.
Great, and thanks, Mathias. And I mean, Pietari, are you seeing games that are catching your eye on this genre? I mean, I know Supercell have thought quite hard on this. So just in gameplay, what are you seeing that's impressing you right now?
I think those that will be like really, really impressive ones are still about to come. I think that sort of like similarly to any other sort of like mainstream entertainment mediums, the environmental themes are rising up more and more, especially in the storytelling and action genres, probably in all others as well. We are, of course, still way younger form of entertainment compared to books and movies and others. So I guess we're still quite much in the starting phase, and I guess now it's more starting from the raising awareness side of things, I'd say.
Yeah. And just building on that, I mean, what's giving rise to that? Where is that demand or that new energy coming from? Is it from the people who work in games? Is it the audience that play them? Or is it the new reality that's surrounding us? So what do you think is pushing games to be maybe more consciously conscious about this? I mean, Alan, what are you seeing?
Well, I actually think it's coming from all angles. So, the recent climate marches, there were over 4 million youth out on the streets globally. I mean, those are some remarkable numbers, and they're growing. So there is an audience, and you can see it even in the modding community around city skylines or Minecraft or Roblox. You see environmental and climate themed mods, which is interesting, and our medium is kind of unique that way. You'll get fan fiction in some of the movie and TV franchises, but when people are creating mods, they have to immerse themselves in the subject of mod, and that's really powerful. And the tools for making games are becoming more and more democratized. You're seeing middle school kids, high school kids, college kids making games, and a lot of them are starting to have pretty provocative impact themes, because an impact generation. I think 41%, Sam, you would probably know, of the global population is under 24, and an incredible number of them are playing games on diverse platforms. So I do think we're seeing it from the audience, but I see it from the developers and publishers as well. Not all of them, but some of them.
Great. Well, thanks, Alan. And Pietari, if I can just come back to you, which is about how Supercell thinks about this. I mean, when you are in the studio talking to colleagues and you're thinking about the carbon footprint of your company, where do you see your responsibility stopping and starting? Is it just on your servers, or does it go all the way to your players?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think our sort of like the whole process of becoming carbon neutral first and carbon negative at the end basically started from the employees and their wishes. There started to be more and more questions about sort of like our constant flights to other offices and whether we are actually compensating those and things like that. And then we started the whole process of actually calculating our CO2 footprint. So of course, all the server side and everything we do directly. But then, of course, sort of like the 95% of the sort of like a bigger mobile gaming company's footprint, probably, at least in our case and in Rovio's and Space Apes case that I know have done the same, actually comes from the player side. So the energy consumption caused by our players playing our games for billions of hours or billions of days yearly. So of course we wanted to take those into consideration as well and compensate those ones as well. But it's pretty hard to draw the line what should be included. Of course, some of those things are already compensated by device manufacturers or operators or other platforms.
And I mean, just two quick questions wrapped into one, which is, I mean, how hard was it for you to calculate the carbon of your players and the use of the games? And for those that might be watching this who have their own studio, how could you help them?
It's not actually that complicated as it might seem in the beginning. I guess the first thing that you should be aware of is that like the whole CO2 emissions calculation, it's not an exact science. You need to realize that there will always be people that can claim that, well, you didn't take this into account, or did you actually consider that these many players are having Android devices in this country and which servers are running there and these kind of things. So I guess my advice to anyone would be that just do it and get started. And I'm sure that all, including Supercell, will be willing to help you guys there, and all the alliance members at least will be happy to help to get you started.
Great, thanks, Pietari. And just to build on that, Pietari's leading some thinking within the Alliance on some best practice and some guidelines about how to do this. So those who want to know more, Pietari's kind of cracking through a bit of a template for folks to think on. Alan, if I can just come back to you, and just about expectations. I mean, people play games because they love the game and they want to just jump out from the lives that they live and have some escapism. Do people want to have this kind of content in a game? And how do you best present it in a way that people engage with it rather than just reject it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't think there's one answer. I think in some cases you're making games to make people who are already committed go deeper or learn more or connect to real world behavior change and activism or activity or legislation or personal behavior change. In other cases, you're making broader entertainment that is creating an awareness around an issue and perhaps a stepping stone to future change. So for example, we did a game with an Alaska Native tribe called Never Alone that really explores the Inupiat community inclusively with the community. People didn't wake up one day and say, I want to learn about the Alaska Native community, but we made an entertaining game. We have close to 4 million players. And that created an awareness of a culture that had been often misrepresented in popular media. And also, interestingly, an introspecting into people's own cultures. We have a game coming out shortly called Beyond Blue. I mentioned Blue Planet 2, the remarkable BBC documentary. We've inspired by that documentary and partnering with them, we're creating a similar game to really get folks engaged in the ocean. I mean, the ocean is the beating heart of the planet. You look at that Earthrise photo and we are a blue planet. And the ocean's incredibly remarkable. We spend a fortune going to space, but we've barely discovered this incredible world. So our goal with that game is to make it a fun game that people choose to do with their discretionary time, but to get them engaged in just how incredible the ocean is and these explorers, to inspire people to become explorers of this planet. And we have great partners, and you can get engaged with the partners and you can go deeper, but it's more an awareness of the power of the ocean than a deep behavior change focused game. We hope it'll lead to behavior change, but you have to, to care, to act, you have to fall in love with it and care about the ocean. And that's what we're focused on with Beyond Blue.
Thanks, Alan. And I mean, I know, Mathias, you're trying different things in Subway Surfers. I think you've got an axis of different games taking different approaches. One is a deep dive into a certain experience where you can just learn and immerse yourself in a certain environment. Then there are other playables that millions and millions of people love, where integrating such themes might be a bit more challenging. But what have you started to try and do at Sybo?
I think we have a lot of passionate colleagues that all are very, just echoing what Alan Pietari said, that are keen on doing things. It really means a lot for them purpose-wise, that they can do stuff. The challenge then is if you have a game with 100 million MAU, that small changes can be both impactful in a good way, but they can also take away the game experience from players that just liked what it was. So the first change we did was actually to put in environmental messaging in the environment, so the game environment. When you run, currently we're in Iceland for Easter. On our world tour, you have windmills in the background, or you pass windmills. When we were in Austin a couple of months ago, we had solar panels on the rooftops. Those might not seem significant to the deeper story-driven games, but that actually means that 100 million players are seeing windmills and solar panels, and that we hope that will also encourage conversations in families and regions that haven't had that conversation before. We want to do more in terms of both engaging with the player on gameplay modes or having aspects of the game touch upon more deeper narratives. But I think for Subway Surfers specifically, the best we can do is just to bring awareness and start conversations. What we're then doing on the side, we've had green game jams internally, and we've also helped co-lead the partnership, the alliance, on doing a mobile green jam, where 11 companies are now pitching, actually submitted yesterday, a lot of good ideas for what they could do in their already big titles, some of the biggest titles on mobile. Supercell included, and Rovio, Space Ape, and others. Of course, mentioning 3 is not doing justice to the rest of the 8. But basically having a lot of good ideas coming together, where every company, every team has challenged themselves to say, what could we do if we wanted to up it in terms of messaging? What could we do to have an increased green and social impact with our games, even if it's existing and even if it's already hugely successful?
Okay, thanks, Mathias. And just in terms of the green game jams, I think they've shown a lot of promise and a lot of energy from within the studios that people are keen to do. And I just wanted to get a sense, Pietari talks about the energy that you have from colleagues in Finland and other studios, I'm sure. Alan, are you seeing the same in the US, or is this a European thing? Is it a global thing? Do you think the industry is coming to a collective mindset on this, or are you in the alliance more of a fringe bunch of renegades that are pushing an agenda that everyone is saying is somebody else's business?
You know, we're a publisher of commercial social impact games, so folks often reach out to us, and it's global. I mean, we've heard from folks in China and Russia, in the US, and these are developers and publishers. I think on the commercial side, you know, folks are saying, where is there an organic alignment of either game mechanics or things that are fun that can not only not inhibit, but accelerate commercial returns by exploring these issues. And obviously that's the biggest win, when it is organic to the play pattern, to the game mechanics and the business model. And that's hard. I mean, that's what we focus on, is finding that alignment. There are also projects that are not necessarily commercial. They may have very specific goals with very specific people working in, say, refugee camps or in different parts. It's almost games as aid or games as behavior change. And those have a different design methodology. And there are developers and publishers working on that. It's probably a little less relevant to this audience, but some of those are very impactful. And in some of those projects, you get the clues as the play patterns and the sort of where there's fun that can actually then go into the commercial space. But there's definitely interest. But you know, the game industry is hard. It's hard to make games. It's hard to make games that are commercial. So the folks that are really leaning in, I would say, are the early wave. And I think when we get some proof points that it can be commercially successful and that it can also attract talent. A lot of folks at this generation wants to work for companies and wants to work on projects that they feel good about and that are changing the world for the positive. And we are a talent-driven business.
Thanks, Alan. And I mean, Pietari, I'm going to come back to you again, just about the alliance, and just be interested from a Supercell perspective about what have you got from being part of it, and where you'd like it to see it go next.
To grow, of course, that's what I would like to see. No, honestly, I think it's we're talking a lot within Supercell always about impact. What kind of impact like any decision might have, and I guess the same goes to the alliance. It's obvious that with sort of like all the members on board, and we're talking about over 1 billion players globally. So what kind of impact can we actually reach through those players and through this alliance? So it's definitely something where we're way bigger as a group than we would be like each individually working like separately in our own silos, doing something that anyone or anyone else would actually know what we're doing. So knowledge sharing and getting the support from others is definitely important. And of course, sort of like us in all the game development, it's all about the creativity, and it all comes down to the designers and developers themselves. And I think the alliance has been like internally for us like a great way and possibility to promote this like important theme internally and get people excited.
That's good. And just about the trade bodies, I'm just curious just to get your take about what do you think the role of the likes of ESA and those kind of groups on this? I mean, should they be supporting this with their members, or is that a different type of representation? I mean, maybe I'll talk to you on that one, Alan.
Yeah, I mean, we've worked very closely with the ESA and the ESA Foundation on a number of different projects. I mean, as a trade group, as a lobby, they represent the game industry, but they also want to highlight where games are improving people's lives, like during the pandemic. But it goes much deeper. In fact, one of the projects we worked on for many years with the ESA was a youth game design competition. And the game design competition, a lot of kids want to make games, and often they want to make games, as we've talked about environmental themes. And the ESA has been a great anchor partner for that. We're actually going to launch soon an international competition, youth game competition, and there's going to be a theme around environment, exploration, and equity. And I expect to get submissions from around the world. And the trade groups have been great partners on programs like that.
Great, thanks, Alan. Okay, and I think as we start to move to the end of this chat, I just wanted to maybe just get your collective wisdom for those that are watching this and just thinking about what does this mean for them. So maybe just put your feet in their shoes and just think about what is a practical and useful piece of advice you could give them about how to begin this journey if they don't know where to begin. And maybe Matthias, we start with you.
Yeah, I think I'm having two thoughts to that question. I think the first one is exactly as we do in the Alliance, is to have the conversation. I think calling for a team meeting or just having an open town hall saying, how can we actually have impact? What platform do we have access to? What projects do we have in the pipeline? What can we do as a company? What can we do as a team? I think that conversation and sharing knowledge and even drawing upon the experience of the Alliance already within the first sort of 8 months of operations, I think there's a lot of learnings just from having conversations. What can we do as a team? I think the other point that springs to mind is that when we hire at Sybo, we want diversity. If I have the choice between two equally good, I choose minority. I don't care if it's sex, gender, background, whatever, but I want the ones that we don't have any of already. Likewise, when you make game design choices, if you have the choice between two, choose the social or choose the green version. I'm not saying that you cannot make a game where an aspect of the game is burning down a forest or killing an animal, but if it doesn't drive the story, then perhaps choose the kinder, more social, more green aspect of the game.
Thanks, Matthias. Maybe I'll come to you, Pietari. What would your piece of advice be? You've already given one, so you've got a chance for another one.
Yeah, so if you're still sort of like really in the thinking of the first steps phase, then of course I guess compensating at least your own footprint would be the bare minimal way to start the whole process, and probably that's something that will also get others involved in discussion about the whole thing and communicating about these themes internally. So yeah, that would be definitely the first step. I consider that myself as more as a tax basically nowadays that everyone, just any company should be doing anyways. So.
Great, thanks, Pietari. And Alan, you started with Rachel Carson as like a frame for this discussion. Where do you see? I mean, what piece of worldly advice would you give the sector that are listening and thinking? What's in your mind, Alan?
Games are a craft; they're not a commodity. And making great games is an art form. I mean, the individuals and teams that make these games that reach tens, hundreds of millions of people with billions of hours of lean forward interactive entertainment, they're special folks. And as a former studio head at a game company, finding those folks and retaining them is a great challenge. I think if game companies talk like Mathias, having a team meeting and seeing who's interested, because you got to be interested, you got to be passionate about it. But I believe that passion is there. It's not everybody, but it's there. And that passion exists within some very talented folks that are either at the top of their craft or emerging to become at the top of their craft. And I think if they and the teams that they put together lean into some of these ideas, we could have a game that is as impactful or more impactful than Silent Spring. I mean, these games reach tens, hundreds of millions of people with immersive game mechanics. And a lot of the game mechanics, like I've been really fascinated by the blend of ancient practices, the farming, the fishing, the collaborative community things that are the essence of lots of games, whether it's Stardew Valley or all of the sort of farming, fishing, crafting games, as well as advanced technology. The most advanced technology blended with the ancient practices, I believe is a powerful alchemy for how we deal with climate change. Games do that really well. There's verbs in all of that. There's game mechanics in all of that. Somebody is going to figure out a game that explores this stuff that reaches tens and hundreds of millions of people. And I'll go even one step further, building in game loops where real world behavior change and mobile check-ins, advancing your virtual characters and worlds is actually building real world behavior change into the game loops. I mean, there's ideas here that can be explored in game jams with talented developers. I believe it's going to happen within the next 10 or 20 years. And I think the game industry can potentially be more impactful than any other medium. And I think we're just trying to build the building blocks and just inspire what's possible right now.
Brilliant. Thanks, Alan. Well, I think that brings us to an end of this. It's been great to listen to all three of your opinions. I think from the UN's perspective, we see the video gaming industry as a transformative platform that can do really remarkable things. And I think there's already people doing truly incredible work in the sector. But we need more people like Alan, like Pietari, and like Matthias in this kind of group so you can learn from each other and bring your best every day. So you're not just making brilliant games that entertain, give fun, new perspectives and ideas, but also think about what legacy they can leave in terms of impact and outcomes as well. So thank you very much for joining this discussion. And for those that do want to join the Playing for the Planet Alliance, do drop me a line and we'd be happy to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sam, for pulling this all together.
Pleasure.